All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Paula Toro, and today I'll be summarizing The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. This is a classic short story that explores guilt, irony, foreshadowing, madness, and perception. I'll be describing the setting, points of view, and the plot of the story using the five main points of the plot structure, which are exposition, rise in action, climax, fall in action, and resolution. Okay, let's take a look. The story is set primarily inside of a house at night. The writer doesn't give us any specific location or city, but we do know that the house is confined and is in a domestic area, and the setting helps to create the feeling of tension and suspense. Most of the action of the story happens in the old man's bedroom, which in my opinion helps to make the story and even the reader feels more claustrophobic. When I was reading the story, I imagined everything in a mid-sized old-time house. But with all the setting and description of the room, I do have to admit that I imagined the room a lot smaller than a normal-sized bedroom. The story is told from a first-person point of view. The narrator speaks directly to the reader, as in a normal conversation, and he has this constant feeling of nervous and keeps insisting during the whole story that he is fine, that he is sane, that he's not crazy, even when his actions shows the completely opposite. He describes himself as clever and rational, yet his obsession with the old man's vulture pale blue eye shows completely that he is insane. The other main character that we have in the story is the old man's, who the narrator describes as friendly and innocent. But the old man does has a defining physical feature, which is his vulture pale blue eye, as already mentioned previously, which drives the narrator crazy to the madness and ends up in the murder. For the exposition, the story opens with the narrator explaining that he is sane, but he has an accurate sense of hearing with sharp senses that come from his disease of being dreadfully nervous. He introduces the old man who lives with him, they live together, and reveals his growing obsession with the old man's eye. This sets the stage for the conflict and introduces the characters and the main tension. Alright, so the rise in action begins as the narrator plans to kill the old man. He sneaks into the old man's bedroom every night for a whole week, just carefully watching him while he sleeps, and becomes increasingly anxious and obsessed, just waiting for the old man to open his eye. The narrator planning and growing agitation during this part builds suspense and nervous for the readers. And personally, for that part while I was reading it, I was feeling really uncomfortable and nervous. Okay, here we got to the climax. It happens on the 8th night, the last night, when the old man finally wakes up. The narrator describes his feeling as a mix of fear and excitement, and finally attacks the old man and ends up killing him. Here is where we have the tension peaks. The narrator kills the old man and hides the body under the floorboards. Alright, we got to the following action. The following action happens when the police finally arrives to the house, responding to a neighbor report for a scream. The narrator feels pretty confident, believing that he has committed the perfect crime. He walks the police around the house, and he even sits with the police to just talk, and he acts completely normal during this time. Alright, here we got to the resolution. The resolution comes as the narrator begins to hear like a ringing sound in his ears, and he started having a headache. He started to imagine the beating sound of the old man's heart that it's located under him. The ringing seems to come louder and louder every time, and it starts overwhelming him with guilt and paranoia. Unable to tolerate more the ringing sound and the headache, he ends up confessing the murder to the police. revealing that he is completely insane and that his own conscience has completely destroyed him. Okay? And for the end, the Telltale Heart is a chilling exploration of guilt and madness. Edgar Allan Poe uses a first person narrator to let us experience the descent into obsession. The story shows how under the table paranoia and obsession can lead into destruction. And this is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this summary, and I wish you a really good day. Bye bye.